Hello everybody, I'm Stephanie. Today we're going to be taking a look at one particular pose at Garland Pose or Malasana. So join me on your mat wherever you're at and let's get started. So today we're going to be taking a look at Malasana, and in Sanskrit when we break this word apart it has two parts to it, mal and asana. Mal meaning impurity and asana meaning posture. So this is an impurity posture, and in Eastern culture they use this pose as an elimination pose. This is also a pose that is used for giving birth during pregnancy. So we're going to be taking a look at this posture and some of the contraindications for it and some modifications for your body type. So looking at the pose, traditionally, Garland Pose, sometimes also referred to as Yogi Squat, you're going to come to a standing position and step the feet apart, ankles wider than the hips. The first thing you want to look for is that the ankles are wider than the hips and not directly stacked underneath the hips. So separating the feet and turning the toes out slightly. They're not going to be turned fully out to 90 degrees. We're not coming into a ballet position, but the toes are pointed up at diagonals towards the top two corners of your mat. Pulling the core in, so keeping a nice long tall torso. You can bring hands to heart center, or you can bring the hands down to the floor as you're squatting. Reaching the tailbone straight down, and then bringing the hands together if you had brought the hands to the floor, engaging the core, lifting up through the spine and grounding down all four corners of the feet. Equal pressure, pressing out with the arms and pressing in with the thighs. That's going to help to ground down all four corners of the feet. Now, this posture is not a posture that is very commonly seen in the Western culture, and that's because we sit a lot at our desks, in our chairs, and so we have very tight hips. So you might have a different view of this posture. It might not be something that's very comfortable for you. So I'm going to give you a couple of different modifications. First thing is, when you're coming down into this posture, if you have tight hips, hands can come to the floor and you can take more of a froggy posture, just rocking from one side to the other, opening up the hips. So when you're cued in class to come into Malasana or Garland Yogi Squat, you can just take this movement from side to side, opening up the hips. If the hips are still not reaching down and you're having a problem and the spine is reaching down, maybe giving yourself a little bit of support. You can use one block. There's 3 different levels to our blocks, or you can stack 2 blocks, one on top of the other. I'm going to show you an option with one block. I'm going to put it on the second level. You're going to place it straight behind you and then have a seat on the block. Feet can be very far out from you. Then pulling the core in, spine reaches up, begin to walk the feet back, still keeping ankles wider than your hips. You don't want to bring everything in very close. Hands come to heart center, and then you find that equal pressure, pressing out with the elbows and in with the thighs, lifting with the heart. That might make it a little bit more accessible. You can always turn the block up and sit even higher, and just finding a position that's comfortable for you. So if you have very tight hips, this might be one modification that helps you out. A couple other things that might be happening in your body is, as you're coming down, you might always have the tendency to rock back, and then you're always falling down onto the tailbone. If you always have that tendency to fall back, you've got 2 different options here. First, you can find something to hold on to and lower yourself down. I'm going to show you here with a chair, so you can grab either onto the top of the chair or to the inside of the chair, but you're pulling down and not straight back, so you're not flipping it on you. So you can do this with a countertop too if you'd like to. But separating the feet again, stance is nice and wide. reaching the tailbone straight down. That's going to give you something to pull onto, to pull forward instead of just rocking all the way back. and just taking some motion there. So that's one option if you have a tendency to fall back. Another option that you can use is to come against a wall. Tailbone's going to be against the wall, but not the heels. Make sure the heels are still forward because you want to give yourself space to squat down. Hands come to heart center. Tailbone stays pressed up against the wall, and you're just sliding straight down. This is going to also keep you from rocking all the way back if you have a tendency to fall back. One other thing that you can do is you can use a blanket. If you come into Malasana and you notice that the heels are lifting, it might be because the Achilles tendons are a little tight. So you just want to give yourself a little cushion, placing the heels on the blanket, nice wide stance still, and then having a seat. You might realize or notice in your body that makes it much more accessible, so you're not having to work on getting the heels down because the Achilles tendons are very, very tight. If you're wanting to work on releasing the Achilles tendon, you can always place something on the ground. You can also do this up against a wall, but placing your toes up against something to give some lift, and then very gently rocking back and forth. You'll feel a stretch on the back of the ankle, on the Achilles tendon. And you can begin to walk the foot up just a little bit more to make it a little bit more intense, or walk the foot back to make it less intense. So that's something to stretch those out. But all of these options, all of these modifications are to make it more accessible in your body. And instead of looking at the pose as, oh, I just can't do this pose, do it in a way that is comfortable for your body. One other issue you might be having in your body is that there is some pain when you're bringing the calf into the hamstring. So if that is happening, you can always take a blanket and place it right behind the knees. So as you're squatting down, that connection is cushioned a little bit. You can also check out to see how the hips are feeling and work on opening up the hips by flipping the posture on its back. So you're basically taking Malasana supine on its back. So coming all the way down to your back, widening your stance, and the knees are wider than your hips, reaching the ankles up so the ankles are stacked right over the knees, which are wider than your hips, and reaching up inside, outside of the shins, the ankles, the feet, and pulling in. If you're having a hard time pulling in and making the connection, maybe that's an indication that the hips are very, very tight. So if you're finding your happy baby, it looks more like this and you can't almost bring the knees to the chest, that's an indication that the hips are very tight. If you're able to make that connection and you can pull down and there's not an issue of bringing the knee up towards the hip, it's not going to be a hip issue. It's going to be just an issue of pulling the core in, sitting straight down. So maybe lifting the heels up or finding some support or bracing in. But just spend some time in this more in your daily life. So if you tend to garden, maybe you find a little seat and work in your garden, in your Malasana, in your Yogi Squat. And over time, you might notice that the hips are opening up, that the heart is staying lifted. You might not even need the support anymore. And you might find a little bit more comfort and natural positioning coming into Malasana. But if you don't, being gentle and kind with yourself, modifications are not a sign of weakness. They're just different versions. Everybody's got a different body type. So being gentle and kind with yourself, no matter where you're at. Thank you so much. Blessings and namaste. What's the word I'm looking for? Goodness. I'll do that again.